Thank you, Alice. Love you. I'm flattered. I'm Will Harrison. I'm an alcoholic. Um, Definitely feel fortunate to be in the club of AA. Like just the baseline club. Like all we're one level, no above, below. Um, but I think what Alice was talking about is like the kind of fellowship of the spirit. Um, I had this big idea before coming to AA and in the first couple months of AA that I didn't want to, I didn't want to get sober for a really long time. And I definitely didn't want to be involved with like the sober kids because they were the ones that like I was 26 when I got sober. And I would know kids that it seemed like they would kind of fall out, as the years would go on. Like they would get sober and quit drinking. And typically, like they had, I'm like 19 and they like got into drugs before everyone else, or they went, I'm seeing them as like they went off the deep end, and then they would be hanging out with these kids that I would either see every so often or like on social media that just seemed like they had way too much energy and were too hyperactive and were almost like faking it high on life kind of stuff. Um, and I was really prejudiced, and because I was not like I was heavy and dark is like the best way to explain how I felt in the last couple of years that I was drinking, and really through a lot of it. But the people that I've now like gotten connected with and like fell in love with so much like are those people that are super enthusiastic. Like a ton of people that I've met that are connected with this group, um, and that I've met. I live in New Orleans and I got sober in Baltimore, and I was sending messages back with, I'm forgetting your name, but the gentleman in Baltimore, um, and he was asking what my home group was, and it was there's a group that started up there when I lived up there that was just like it was all about carrying the message out of the big book, like an hour breakdown, and a bunch of really young people that like all we wanted to do was sponsor people. For myself, almost to like an arrogant level of like I don't do anything in AA besides sponsor people, and I'm not going to the barbecue or the bowling league or whatever. Um, because I just there was like this big identity of like I'm a sponsor and I'm doing things the right way, and that's been like a part of my whole experience throughout AA or throughout my life, and then AA just my mind just like grabbed onto it in AA of like wanting to be seen doing the right thing or doing a good job or like being better than somehow, and I think like the Step 11 practice has started to expose that and help me get free of that, as well as like a bunch of other stage characters, essentially like roles that I've just assigned myself, or I heard something when I was a kid, or I was in a frat and guys were saying stuff that I just like made my identity without even really choosing to. Um, but now I'm involved in a group down here that I want to go to the bowling thing, the tubing trip, and like I had a bunch of people over here on Saturday night, most of them like AA people, just making tacos and playing games and hanging out till past midnight, and it's like my heart is alive. Um, and that's not like the dude that I. It's like slowly I've been like sucked more into AA since coming in. Um, like I was so against. I was like with that same attitude of like I'm just gonna do I'm doing the steps. That's my thing. Like had this arrogant attitude about people that did like general service, and now I'm like getting involved at the local level and with the hotline and at the area level, and because like my heart's been, it's like something's pulling me in. Like I'm being driven to a degree that is like from a very different place than how I was driven before I got sober, but still I'm not in control. So I think it's probably important to like talk about why I need a spiritual practice in terms of like the 11th step and then all the rest of the steps, which make the 11th step possible. Like I got sober almost 5 years ago, and I drank for 13 years before that, and it was a lot of fun for the majority of it, I think. And then like the last 3 to 5 years was pretty bad. Like bad, like the way that I viewed it was bad things would happen, but otherwise, like I'm just enjoying myself. Like I was 19 and I got in trouble with the law a couple times in like 4 months, and I didn't plan to either time. And it's still like I could see the physical component of alcoholism that once I start drinking, I'm not in control of how much I drink. Because from the first time that I got drunk, it was like we were drinking Everclear and it went down and it just burned, and like from the throat to my stomach, and then lit me up from like the torso up until my head was like glowing. And I was conscious for like 30 minutes before I blacked out and woke up like in my own throat at like 11 a.m. One of the worst hangovers ever. Um, Definitely like top five. And then did that throughout high school and continued, but I couldn't see until I got to the mental component of this thing, where like the illness is based. And now it makes so much sense. Like some of the stuff in chapter 3 in the book where it's talking about like this illness centers in my mind. I haven't had a serious thought to take a drink in almost 5 years, but the problem centers in my mind. Like whether there's a real problem or not, like it's coming from me. Um, but the biggest problem was that like I kept convincing myself, seemingly, or something kept convincing me to drink, even though I needed to be sober and I wanted to be sober. And I couldn't figure that out on my own. Like a couple of questions that my sponsor asked me, like, have you ever drank against your own will? Was one of them. And I was again like giving him the right answer. I want to be like the best AA student. And I was like, no, it was my responsibility. Like I'm taking accountability for my actions. And he's like, are you sure it wasn't up to you? Like, are you sure you were in full control? Because you just told me a story about how like you're not going to drink until Friday night, and then Tuesday morning rolls around and you're drinking before work, even though you know you don't want to. And it didn't sink in right away. It took like a couple times, and like continuing to go through the book to have this real experience where it felt like my head was being cracked open of like, oh my God, there's been something like I've totally overlooked. Like I'm not as in control as I thought. But the first moment that I felt like that was we sat down to read the doctor's opinion. It was at this Starbucks in the middle of Baltimore. And I just went back there. I started sponsoring a guy down here, and like a month ago, we happened to be both going back to Maryland to visit our families. So we sat down and read the doctor's opinion like at the same table. And then he met my sponsor, and they're talking and catching up. And within like 5 minutes, they realized that the last time they saw each other was when they were 19, when they were like causing havoc all over Baltimore. And it was just like one of those like coincidence is a funny way to spell God kind of moments. Like these guys used to run together, and now throughout this weird way from New Orleans back up, they've gotten reconnected. But he pointed out the line where like it says we are restless, irritable, and discontented unless we can again experience the sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks. And he pointed at me during the restless, irritable, discontent, and he said, that is your sober condition. And I remember just thinking like it was like everything was unraveling. Like it was like, oh shoot, like I was under the impression that like I'm 26 and I'm in a lot of debt, and I just moved and I've been getting drunk too much, and I've got a girlfriend that things aren't going great. So like there's a lot of pressure on me, and that's why I feel the way that I do. And he helped flip it, that like, no, that condition is prior to all of the other stuff. And then it forces you to seek relief from it. And then that causes other external issues, but the problem's inside. And that's what you keep trying to treat with alcohol. And then it was like, I mean, the hook started to be in at that point. Like I didn't say like, okay, I'm going to go, drive across the country and make my amends, and I'm going to spend a lot of time sponsoring people and da 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 da. It was just like, it convinced me to do the next step. Like it convinced me to keep reading the book with them. And then this was like the only time in my life where this has happened, where like only the next thing was like available in front of me. Like it wasn't like this far out, like, oh my God, what's going to happen when I am sponsoring people? I'm not going to know what I'm gonna do. I wasn't even thinking about how afraid I was to make amends with people. It was just like, okay, we just say the third step, and then we just like write the resentment inventory. And then he gave me instructions for the next two, and I wrote those, and it was just like one thing at a time. So we got to amends. And the reason I said earlier that like, the 11th step wouldn't really be possible with like all the other ones is like, they're so like, I am totally convinced that the only thing blocking me from God is me. And especially like what's going on here. Like it's a belief in my heart from some pointers that some like guides have given me, plus my direct experience that God is everywhere, always available at all times. And the only thing blocking me is just like a delusion or an illusion of my own mind that like, there is something wrong with what is. There's one dude who's, this is just like one of his sayings, just all is well. And my mind will totally cloud that with like, I don't own a house, even though I live in like a perfectly safe and comfortable place where I can have friends over. It's just like, so things aren't okay. The housing market's gone crazy the last couple of years. I won't be able to afford one. If only I had some money a couple of years ago. Like it'll just make a problem out of nothing. And it will take things that. So this is how I know how powerful this is. Is like there have been some things that look and seem like real problems where I was having a conversation with a guy when I got back to New Orleans, and he kept trying to convince me that it was wrong and that I should be suffering. My dad was in the hospital for like 13 days in March, and he had an intestinal surgery and had to get 4 feet of his intestines removed, and that was like a surprise. And then I essentially like was on this overnight flight because my sister called me and was like, I was going to go back on Sunday. He wanted me to go to this wedding. I was like, I don't want to go to the wedding. I want to come be with you. And he's like, you have to, you have to be there. You have to represent the family, whatever. There's not enough room. There was literally like only 2 spots in the hospital. So I go to the wedding, and then my sister calls me and she's crying, like, they had to intubate him. And I'm like, what does that mean? She's like, that means they had to put a tube down his throat. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, is that mean that doesn't sound good? And she's like, I don't know. I'm like, fuck. Immediately first thoughts are selfish. Just like, oh my God, I didn't say the right thing last time when I was with him. I wasn't patient enough. And was like nauseous and called my sponsor and another guy. And like the 10th step is really clear on just like immediately. And I've found that my like selfishness will just like roll into like a snowball, and it will build. Like if left untreated, like if there's just like a thought that sprouts out of wherever and I can catch it early enough, sometimes I can catch it without even have to talk to someone. Like thought comes into my boss the other day came into my office, and he was just like, hey, he'd asked me for something earlier in the day, hadn't even started working on it. And he came back to my door to ask me about it. And I immediately looked at him, and I want to be like, get off my case. And then like slowly I could see like, oh, I just told him I was going to do it and I didn't do it. And I was just like, absolutely. I'm like, God, please remove it. And then it just like fell away. But sometimes it's been building. So like my sponsor and another man helped me get clear that like this has nothing to do with me. Like this has more to do with obviously my dad, but also my mom and my sister who had been with him for like the last couple of days, like exhausted. So I was able to go home and be with him for like a week. And it was like, I mean, hospitals are just exhausting. Like there's like an energy that gets taken from you, I hope, and like it's put to the patients, or it's just a place that just sucks energy out, and it's emotional and everything. So we'd go to the hospital until 8, and then we'd go home, and I would just like lay on the couch, just like it felt like, just like everything was kind of sucked from me, and I would feel kind of like I wanted to cry physically, but I would just be sort of, laying there, not really able to talk, and I just be with my mom. And a lot of people were praying for him. He went back into the ICU twice because of some complications. And like, there was, when I was flying back, like I didn't know if I was going to be flying back to be with him or to like, start making some serious arrangements. Like the whole week, there was not a moment where my mind told me that I should be anywhere else. Everything was like just the way it should be. When I got to the hospital, my dad like looked at me, and he starts telling me about this AA meeting he went to before I was born, like right when he was getting sober, and he started crying when he was talking about how this guy was talking about how AA saved his life. How he was and it just, it had just popped into his head, and he's sharing this with me, and I was all like, I had just gotten off of like a red eye. I was like half listening, and then I was like, wait, what? And he just like went back to tell me this, like he was just thinking about it, and it was like everything was stripped away except for love from him. And I mean, that's not necessarily his like MO, like he's like kind of like me, like sort of a cynical dude and pragmatic, but it was like it was just like everything, we were just gelling. It was some of the most special time of my life looking back on it, and it's like, and it felt that way the whole time. It was just like my heart was so full, and like my home group it's 2 speakers, for 10 minutes each, and then a 10-minute smoke break. And then there's questions from the Ask It basket where you can write a question and you put it in, and then the speakers alternate answering them. And like every other week, there's a question that's like, what's the hardest thing that you had to go through in sobriety? And I'm sitting there. I'm so selfish that I will just answer the questions myself as if how I would answer them. And if the speaker says something similar, I'm like, good job. Like it's just arrogant. My sponsor had me praying for a while before going to AA meetings. Like, God, please remove my fear of what these people think of me, and please, like, help me not judge anyone. And I'll stop saying that prayer, and it'll probably be a good idea to do it. But inevitably, like, one of them is like, what's the hardest thing you'd have to go through? And like, it's usually something like death or like a legal thing or like some big external thing. Like the hardest thing I've had to go through is like a situation with a girl where my mind was just eating me alive. Like the external was not that big of a deal. I agreed, my sponsor agreed, like everyone, but my mind is just like, can't get off of it. It's just like rapping and rapping to the point where I'm like physically in tears, just in my office, just like, oh my God. But this was like getting close to God, and the practice of like a dedicated meditation practice combined with like sharing this stuff openly with people. Like I can't see totally what's going on in my own mind. Like sitting quietly, I could look at it and see the content of it, but I can't often see the reality of it. Like it's really important for me to be in touch with other people. Like my sponsor, primarily because he's the dude that like heard my first fifth step and a second one and knows the whole story of like my last 5 years really intimately. And then a lot of my time, he just knows from me telling him from before that. So he can see a pretty clear picture. But it's like allowed me to be free, like the going through like the middle part of the steps, like especially the amends process, like allowed me to be free, period, of what's going on in my mind. Like there were times that hasn't happened much since when the mind just like turned off in that process. Like I made amends to a woman in Alexandria. It was like not far from Baltimore. And I had lied to her and acted like I wanted to be her boyfriend, like I was a boyfriend, to sleep with her, to get what I wanted. And the intention was never to hurt her. It was just to have fun and get what I wanted. And I made her feel, according to her, like she was incapable of being loved and unlovable. And she didn't date anyone for a little while after me because she didn't feel like she should because of how I treated her. And she told me all that. And I felt awful. And when I asked her what I could do to make it right, she said the conversation was enough. And even seeing this text message from me was enough to allow me to heal, which was really cool to hear, because my mind had been telling me like, they're going to think you're a weirdo if you text them. This was so long ago. And this is like from people from high school, and the mind just like my mind and alcoholism, like are synonymous to me, don't want me to go through the process of Alcoholics Anonymous because it knows it will kill alcoholism, or at least like significantly quiet it. So it just, especially during those scary stuff, it just starts throwing out. They're going to think you're unprincipled if you're bringing up stuff from the past, or why bring this up? This is not a big deal, or it's really far away, or whatever. And she said, just don't contact me again. And we like both stood up, like didn't hug her, just like kind of said goodbye. I sat back down, and when I left that place, I don't know if the radio was on or if there was music on or if it was silent, but I drove home with like, for the first time ever, no thoughts. And then within like a week or two, my sponsor and I were sitting down to talk about the 10th and the 11th step. And I'm like, it was like, there was another time where it was like a day of that. And it was all through the same process. And in retrospect, it felt like it was God just being like, yo, like showing me like, do this, like, here is a big gift of like what's available. Of like something you can touch. And then it was like, it felt like I sort of like fell into a well with the meditation thing, like just, and going for a couple minutes every day, and then more and more until I was just like chasing that feeling again. And now more so, it's like allowed me to be kind of like be free, whether I'm getting what I want or not, or whether like things are going my way or not. Like the last probably like 6 months or a year, like I've been waking up and my mind is pretty normal, but for a long time, like I would just wake up with a heavy case of alcoholism. Like I would get up and I would have like a couple seconds of just, maybe I feel kind of like sleepy, dreamy, and then my mind just starts telling me like what I need to do. It's like I'll get up like an hour and a half before I have to be at the office, and it's like you're already late. Time to go do the dishes, or you need to go on a run. Like it'll just boom blast stuff. So it's important for me to get quiet like pretty soon after I wake up. And now sometimes like I'll make a cup of coffee or I'll stretch a little bit. Um, but pretty consistently, like I'll just sit and I'll just sort of start by seeing what's going on up there. A lot of the time it's really not worth listening to. So I'll just try to look for the space sort of between the thoughts. And it's like kind of wild, like giving the mind like less attention. Like there's a couple like big like ideas that I have on how my life should look like. And they're like attached to these roles. Like one of them is like spiritual sponsor guy who, does the right thing. They told me they were gonna give me a 5-minute thing. Who should I be looking for? I don't know when I started. Oh, John. Okay, I see you. And but that like, I should sponsor the world and all these guys should do what I want them to do, and then I should be recognized for it, which is like the most sinister idea, because it's like I'm trying. There was the group that started in Baltimore when I was up there was this like big book breakdown group, and one of our friends came down from Philadelphia, and he was reading the first page of the book, and literally like from the title page, and he goes, Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm just like, oh my god, like the story of how 1,000 men, like this one right here, my book's falling apart, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh my god, is he gonna read through the whatever you call this, like the like all the notes and stuff? But he stops after anonymous. He just reads 2 words and he goes, anonymous means make an impact, don't get noticed. And I was like a year or 2 sober, and I remember sitting there thinking, no, that's not how this is. Like do the hard work and then get noticed for it. That's like half of the gift of it. And now I've seen that it's like any of that is just like setting me up for like a letdown of like, ultimately I'm not going to get like the respect I think I deserve. There was like 6 months down here where this one dude who I love, and I'm really close with now, this dude loves AA, which I just like love people that love AA. But I couldn't see that then. Every time I would see him, he'd say, hey, where you been? I haven't seen you in a while. Or I would be somewhere and he said, oh, you must be speaking at this meeting. If you're here, you wouldn't be here otherwise. And he was just saying like, I haven't seen you. How you been? And I would just hear like, you're not doing it right. You're not doing enough. So like this like inflated idea just ended up driving me crazy, to the point where we do this men's group a couple times a month, and I was exposing it on there. And then all of my friends started, anytime they'd see me, they just say, hey man, I haven't seen you. I'd go back to visit Baltimore. I'll go back like twice a year. He'd be like, I haven't seen you in a while. Have you been going to meetings? Like it really helped me get free of this idea, like exposing it to other people. The most recent idea that like my mind has created is that like I need to be like a bodybuilder and I need to make my body look a certain way. And I've recently started to get free of it, to the point where like I don't know, it's just not, it doesn't have the same hold through going through the same process of like talking to people about it, saying like things are getting a little weird. Like there was a couple days where I wasn't eating as much as I should because I was going to the beach and I wanted to look a certain way. And I was going to the gym to the point where like every, 2 or 3 weeks I would tweak something. Like I was pushing it too hard. And I'm watching all these YouTube videos. I was sitting at a diner with some friends like 4 months ago, and they were talking about going to the gym and health and fitness and working out. And one of them said, I'm trying to get a 6-pack. And one of my other friends, both of whom were like really active in AA, she said she started talking about getting a 6-pack and whatever. And immediately my mind just went, okay, you should do that. And then just went on this campaign of getting up at 4:45 in the morning to go to the gym, watching these YouTube videos to get the most optimal workout, how many sets, how many reps I should do, like the protein, the counting the macros and everything. And it's just like, and I'm watching it and I'm going, there's nothing wrong with this. It's not harming anyone, which is probably true. Like I'm still meeting with guys and going to work, but I was late to my home group's business meeting once because I'm scrambling around trying to go to the gym, whatever. But ultimately it was just like, the question was posed by my sponsor when I was like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, this has gotten a little weird over the last week, like a little disorderly. And he's like, why don't you just ask the question like in quiet? Um, what areas of my life am I grabbing the reins on? Like grabbing the reins of management on. And it was like, well, obviously this, like I've got 3 different apps, for going to the gym and counting my food. Like there's spreadsheets to manage this. Um, so I did it. I sat quietly. It was pretty clear, like this one. But another question came of just like, what does any of this have to do with getting close to God? Because at the same time as this, like I had gotten clear that I'm not really that interested in spending a lot of time like with women and dating, and that I'm less interested in like making a bunch of plans. Like that's another kind of role I've given myself, is like social dude or whatever, like social butterfly. Like I need to constantly be doing things, and really it's so I don't have to sit quietly with my own mind. Because like what happens if I'm alone? Like then my mind might start saying, and which it's done. Um, Recently I've like really been like relishing the time alone, but it's like you're not with anyone. Like there's probably people at an AA meeting somewhere hanging out. I've like done stuff for like 6 nights in a row, and it's like there's people doing something without you, and I would just listen to it. I went to a meeting specifically to go see that one guy who says I haven't seen you in a while. I was like, I did a fifth step in the morning. I went to like an AA thing in the middle of the day, like a regional thing, and I'm sitting on my couch. This is probably like 6 or 8 months ago, and I'm sitting there and I'm like exhausted, and my mind is telling me you should go to this meeting, the Saturday night meeting. And I'm fighting it. I'm like, no, you've literally done AA all day. And 20 minutes before the meeting, I go, "Grr," and I get up and get dressed and go to the meeting, and he wasn't even there. Like my mind will just exhaust me. Um, but at the same time, it's like I'm spending more time in quiet, and I'm seeing the stuff, but I'm still like gripped attached to it. So I don't know, man. It's like it seems like none of this stuff really works in a vacuum, like in isolation. Like I didn't really start to get some relief from it until I exposed it to someone else. Sweet, thank you. 5 minutes left. Um, and I don't really like know what to expose unless I'm sitting quietly. Um, and like the biggest part of this, so that the line, I think I read it for the first time in the 12 and 12, or at least it was the first time that it jumped out, that um Alice had asked me to have like a specific line from something specifically in the 11th step. And I like that one, like meditation is a step out into the sun. And I figured God would like give me something to work with there, but um I don't know. I just thought that was a cool line. But the one I was like, can I talk about something else from a different part? And if I could have, I would have talked about the line from the family afterward where it says, we have come to believe he would like, talking about God, he would like us to keep our head in the clouds with him, but that our feet ought to be firmly planted on earth. That is where our fellow travelers are, and that is where our work must be. And it's talking about this like this spiritual make believe, which I can be super guilty of like reading non-duality books and spending time like an hour in meditation listening to some I am consciousness meditation, and trying to like grasp an ungraspable thing, like trying to get something from me, when all of these guys are talking about it, like there is no me. And I'm like, well, let me see if I can make my experience better, and use spirituality essentially as a way to improve self, which is the total opposite of the deal. But I just love that it's like gives me a pass. It's like it's telling me like it wants, the book is clear that like my head should be with God most of the time. There's this little pamphlet called The Practice of the Presence of God that I just keep buying copies of, and I'll give them to anyone that wants one, because it's about the story of this little monk who was like working in the kitchen his whole life. And it's in really simple language, just talks about consistently, constantly bringing his thoughts to God, which is like the ideal, whether that's like praying to a deity or just being close to my own being and just trying to stay right where I am. And it's really become like an ideal, but none of it really means anything unless like this, person has like a purpose, which has been like being really active with others. And I found that like when I sponsor a bunch of guys, and some of them, like I was thinking about this before, I was quietly like, some of these dudes trust me with talking about stuff and like looking for considerations on stuff that's so it's like it's so like it's such an honor. Like I'm so unqualified. And like the closer that I can be so much more effective at sponsorship when I am not involved, like when I have much less to do. And the reality is like I don't have anything to do with any of it. Like it's totally up to God that I got sober. Like I was showing up to meet Jack, and I remember telling him when I started working with guys, like, dude, this guy's just like giving me the blank stare. Like I have he's not picking up anything. Like, what's the point of me even seeing him? And he's like, dude, that sounds like you. Like I was so scared to talk to other people when I got sober that I was just like nodding my head. And inside, I'm having that experience where like things are exploding. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is my life. And he's like, does this make sense? And I'm like, uh-huh. You know? And but I really start to see that like my only job is to like help these guys see themselves. So like one, alcoholism in the beginning, like see the physical component and the mental component, and then consistently like see selfishness as it comes up. And when I first got sober, I was sponsoring this dude who was the man, like so angry. And he lived walking distance from my place. So we would like there was like a 2-week period where we were just spending time going to each other's houses. And he had kids, and it was him and his wife had been separated for a couple months, and I was giving him these considerations on how he should coordinate visits with his kids and be a parent. And I've never had kids, let alone a wife, let alone been divorced. And I remember getting in yelling matches with him in my apartment of what to do. And now I'm sponsoring a couple guys that are experiencing something similar, and I'm frequently telling them like I'm not really sure what to do here, but I can offer like what Jack told me. This was when that was happening. He was like, you can't offer any considerations on how to be a dad, but you know what it was like to be a kid, and you know what it's like to be extremely driven by resentment and selfishness. So offer him considerations on that, and that's like the buzzword with like a lot of these guys that have girlfriends or partners. It's like, what can we do that is the most honest and the most considerate of them? And it seems like recently, a friend down here suggested this to me like a year or two ago, just like asking open-ended questions. And especially, all right, that's my time. Especially just like, what do you think God would have you do, can help us like both get to the answer ourselves. It seems like when we're connected, it's not just like my sponsor giving me considerations and telling me what to do, or me telling another guy what to do, like when we're on the phone or whatever. There's like a third, and that seems to be like the real power that's keeping this thing moving. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lorraine, recovered alcoholic. Will, that was so wonderful. And I can't help but wonder. So that night that you went to the Saturday night meeting, although you did AA all day, and thought you were going for this whatever reason because that guy had said that to you, and he wasn't even there. So I'm just wondering, like, if something happened that night at that meeting that you went, oh, that's good that I was here tonight. You know what I mean? Like some other thing that you never expected happened at that meeting. I don't know. I'm just thinking about that.
Yeah, actually. I sat down, and my like pretty new recent ex-girlfriend was sitting across, and I had been in a bunch of fear for a little bit, weeks or months, like while in the relationship and after. And I think it just like showed me that I could be in the same place as her and be okay. And that like, she's in AA, that's how we met. And I was gonna have to walk through it. And then I went out to eat with everyone, and yeah, that was nice.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for the question, Lorraine. Hey, Vera, come on in. It's good to have you.
Hey, Vera Alcoholic, grateful to be in this meeting and really grateful to hear your share. Thank you, Will. So I guess if you could elaborate more on, you said, I have two parts. So you said using spirituality to improve yourself when that's the opposite of like the purpose. I think that's what you said, if I got that right. Using spirituality to improve self when that's like the opposite. So if you could elaborate on that, but also you talked about, being okay whether you get what you want or you don't. And so maybe if you could elaborate on that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like my experience has been like a reduced sense of self or less like selfishness, like this idea that I'm like separate from everyone else and that my happiness is based on like what I can get or what like it's like everything's binary, like how if my body looks better than it did the day before, then I'm okay, then I'm better than the day before. And if I have more money in my bank account than I did a week ago, then things are better. Like everything kind of being dualistic, like better or worse. It's all based on this like idea of me, and I need to be like the me needs to be satisfied constantly. And like when I've felt the most free or like really truly happy has been when the me is quieter, like this is what you need, kind of voice quiets down. And there's an idea that my mind will then tell me when some of the other ones are quiet is like, you need peace and quiet to be okay. Like you need a quiet mind to be okay. And then I'll spend time in meditation trying to get a quiet mind. And it's just like, kind of like the snake chasing its tail. It's like, it can only be quieter than it was a little bit before. And then what if it's loud? That means I'm not okay. So it's helped me like see the kind of failed construct of a me or of a self, in that like it's never going to get what it wants. It's always going to have to be better or worse than something or somebody, or it's always going to have to be able to try to improve its situation. And I think like what I've really sort of found is that like everything is well the way that it is. And I think like God is moving through me if I get unblocked from it enough. So I don't really have to like worry too much about trying to be like this like perfect spiritual light. I think God's taking care of that. And then the second part of the question, I forgot. Will you repeat it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if I wrote it down correctly, but you had said something like using
Yeah.
spirituality to improve self when that's the opposite of like what it is, or using spiritual. I
Yeah.
just didn't really understand.
Yeah. I meant like of getting what I want. Like I want to live in a place where like a buddy told me like a year ago, like the best way to get your way is not to have a way. And I want to grow closer to that of like not needing to dictate the way that my life should go. Because I'm not in control of any of it anyway. Like I could say I'm going to be happy and single for the rest of my life, and I'm not going to put my happiness or okayness, on a woman. And then all of a sudden, like has happened in the past, my heart and my mind will be completely taken and moved from me and attached to someone else. And it's just like, if that's God's will, then that's God's will. And I should stop fighting it and just let it happen.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Vera, for your question. Hey, Kim, come on in. Great to have you.
Hi, I'm Kim. I'm an alcoholic. Will, do you have a favorite mantra or saying that you use to shut your mind up?
Thanks for your question. Thank all you guys. No, I'll like keep a couple notes on my phone. And the most recent one is just stay with the sense I am, or be with your being. But I'll really try to kind of feel it out more than say it. But no, not like a real specific one. I like to take little notes and like write little notes on my notepad throughout the day.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for the question. Hey, Ferdinand, come on in. It's great to have you.
Hi, group. Ferdinand, powerless over alcohol. Thanks for your share, Will. I'm the gentleman who we were going back and forth. I asked you what home group you were with.
Yeah, good to see you.
Good. I have attended your home group. You guys, back during the pandemic, did a good job with the So that kind of brings me to my question. What literature has helped you? Because you guys broke back in the day when I attended, y'all broke the big book down really well. So what AA literature specifically has helped you with practicing the 11 step? And good to see you. Thanks for sharing, brother.
Yeah, good to see you. Like AA literature, the big book, mostly they're probably for like 2 years. Like when I started doing it, I only did, like pretty much read. I would read some other stuff, but I would pretty much only read like the 11 step morning portion. And and then like when I moved down here, I moved here when I was like 2 years sober. There was another period of probably like a year where I just like did everything as it was outlined. So like there are a bunch of action words, like in 11, like when it says to think, or when it says to relax and take it easy, or when it's like think about your day, or when it says to ask, like I would just do those things in order. And when it would say like relax and take it easy, I would meditate for 20 minutes. And then I would say like the prayers on 87. That's probably that's definitely like the most impactful one. I've read a number of like other AA books, but they're more like the history based ones, that I've really found to enjoy more.
Thank you so much, Will. Bennett, how about you come in and close this out? It's great to have you.
Hi, my name's Bennett, alcoholic. Well, I was wondering, man, because do you ever find yourself, how do you keep yourself from falling into rote repetition of spiritual practice? How do you stay engaged instead of them just being like, I'm going to pray right now, I'm going to meditate right now, I'm going to call this guy right now? Because I sometimes find I've done something and I have a really great day and I have just a lot of free space in my head. And I find myself, I want to go back and do that exact same thing because I want to get that instead of just letting it be a practice.
That's a great question. It was great watching you during the meeting because you had a big smile on your face a lot of the time. I think 2 ways. One, alcoholism for sure keeps me engaged in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I have a mind that is just trying to get me into some funny business, like whether it's with women, or this idea that like I'm not paid enough and I should work less for the amount that I'm paid, which is my sponsor is like sometimes I'll be like, hey man, I've done this twice. I did it recently. I was like, just had a conversation with Curtis and like, he has my best interest in heart. Like he wants me to make more money. And Jack's like, I know, like I am clear on that. You don't have to tell me. I can see that from here. You know, he lives 1,000 miles away. He's like, no one's trying to hurt you there, bro. But like alcoholism, it's just like there's disturbance that the mind is creating that can continuously be brought back to the process. And when there's like not a ton, like to be honest, recently is a period where there hasn't been a ton, and I feel relatively well. There's an idea that like I want to become, I don't know if the word is enlightened or like less associated with this idea of a me that like keeps me going back to quiet and like I know that and quiet and like working with guys like I want to be totally free. Like I want to be free beyond the need for freedom. You know, I want to like realize like some of the pointers that these guys are saying. So it like keeps me like engaged in the work. And then like being involved with like different commitments, whether it's like at the jail or I do stuff with like the hotline down here. It just like keeps the phone kind of ringing pretty consistently. And there's guys that like keep trusting me to work with them, which is awesome. So I think just the whole kind of deal.
Thank you so much, Will. And thanks everyone for being here and all your questions. I'm going to pass it back to my sister, Michelle.